Hey, it's Alze Calhoun with Coveted Consultant. This video is a summary of a conversation I was having with a gentleman who sells really big B2B projects. His deal size is easily in the six figures, often in the seven figures. And so by definition, this is the complex sale. This is the kind of sale that involves multiple influencers, multiple decision makers. It takes some time to close the sale. These are really big deals, right? Big complex deals. Now, where he was is he was thinking about how to use LinkedIn as a way of generating more leads and closing more business. The typical route he would normally go is he'd hire a sales team, and he would hire them and train them and send them out into the field and do that thing. But he was looking for a more modern way of attracting new business, and perhaps a faster way of attracting new business. And so we were having this dialogue, and I'm offering you the summary here. Because if you're new to advertising and you're new to advertising on LinkedIn, there's a way you should be thinking so that you can keep your costs down. You can keep your costs under control. So we're going to lay out the process here and layer in the thinking so you can see where the cost may just balloon on you and just make it a bad deal all the way around. So here we go. First thing we want to look at is the actual process. Some may call this a sales funnel. So we want to think about this in left to right. So we want to think about this in terms of we got the LinkedIn ads come first, right? We're going to make some ads. We're going to run those ads to a registration page. People are going to opt in for something, right? They're going to opt in for something, and then they're once they register, there'll be some sort of video explaining the opportunity and offering a booking link because we want to get someone on the calendar, right? And once they're on the calendar, they'll have a conversation. We'll converse with them, right? And then there'll be a closed sale. Eventually, they'll become a closed sale. Now, a couple things we know here. We know that in this process, the chance that someone's going to become a closed sale from one conversation is not practical. So we know there's some timing that's going to happen in here, and this process needs to reflect that timing. So let's continue. You'll see what I'm describing here. So what are we doing? What are we actually doing here? So on LinkedIn, we're going to target one specific person on the LinkedIn platform. We're trying to identify one particular decision maker. And when we put that ad in front of them, we want to introduce them to this opportunity. There's a chance to make some money or save some time or remove a specific discomfort that they're experiencing in their world or accomplish a significant goal that matters to them. But this is the selfish part, right? This is what would motivate someone to move forward in this process. But we also want to introduce the fact that they have to meet a certain criteria. So the person that lands on this page has to be a decision maker or at least an influencer in the decision. So they have to be at a certain level in the organization in order for the completion of the form to make sense. They need to have a company of a certain size or type. And they need to be in a certain marketplace, right? So there's a basic profile they have to meet in order for this page or the coming content to be valuable to them. So that's important that we establish that criteria up front. The next step here is that they'll go to a video that will explain the opportunity. Hey, here's what's possible. Here's what can happen here. So if you want this thing, if you're trying to avoid these issues, check that you meet this criteria, you can move forward. There's a possibility here that when they book time, they can also give you some additional information. They can give you their name and their company's name. They can give you their company size. They can give you the issues that they're currently experiencing. So you can have some data about whether or not they fit the core criteria. This opens up the door for a conversation. So the two of you are going to talk. And in that conversation, you can figure out, do you qualify? Like, really, does your organization meet the appropriate standards? Do you have an issue that's worth being resolved? Because this is a very expensive thing. So do we have enough urgency, enough desire here to move forward in the process? If so, then what is the next step, right? If we should continue with this interaction, then what's the appropriate next step? Right, and then you begin to move down the steps of the complex sale, and eventually they will close a sale and become a client. Okay, so that's what we're doing, the actions that we're taking. But why? Why are we taking these actions? Because we know that LinkedIn is the premier B2B social network. We know that that many professionals have a LinkedIn profile, and LinkedIn gives us access to the audience. Okay, that's kind of self-explanatory. This process gives us inbound leads. Now people are coming to us. They're coming to you. And they are saying, they're raising their hands and saying, yes, I want more information. I want to interact with someone about this thing. We're also creating a space for disqualification because certain people don't fit the criteria. And that's not a matter of personal judgment. It's just being honest. This only works if you're in this situation. We can only be valuable to you if you're in this situation. This opportunity only makes sense for you if you're in a certain situation. So it's important to set some disqualifying factors right up front. The value of the conversation. Why do we have the conversation? We're not having the conversation to sell anything immediately. There are too many steps involved. So instead, what we're trying to do here is just assess fit. We want to confirm, are you the right person? Is your company in the right situation? Do we have what we need to move forward? And then if so, we do it, right? So it's important to understand why each of these steps, though it seems so simple, why each of these steps are mandatory to having success, keeping the cost down with this kind of funnel, this kind of sales process. Okay. So we talked about costs. Let's look at the actual costs here. So LinkedIn is on the premium side of online advertising. It's expensive to advertise on LinkedIn. So if you're new to this, you got to see what these numbers look like and not panic. So let's assume that you're paying $10 per click on LinkedIn. All right, let's just kind of lock that in as an assumption. And let's assume that you're going to drive 1,000 clicks. Again, let's lock that in as an assumption. So then it's going to cost $10,000 to get your first bit of data from this campaign. All right, $10,000 is now spent. So let's assume that 20% of the people who land on that registration page actually register. Let's just make that assumption. So then you're going to get 200 leads. And at the moment, it's costing you $50 per lead. Okay, so that's what it's cost you to get someone to register and see the video and the link application that you have. All right. So let's assume that 20% of the people who register, 20% of the registrants choose to schedule. So that is 40 conversations now that have been booked on your calendar, right? 40 conversations, and so you've paid $250 per conversation. Okay. So you have these conversations. Let's assume that 2.5% of the people who you speak to end up becoming a closed sale. Okay, so that's 1 out of 40. So that's one closed sale as a result of this entire process. That means it cost your company $10,000 to close a sale. Now, we got to see these numbers for what they are, because again, if you're new to advertising and if you're new to LinkedIn, this may seem expensive. And on one hand, it is. But remember, if you're closing deals that are 6 and 7 figures, well, there's a cost to acquiring a client. And if the deal is 6 figures large, $10,000 it pales in comparison. This is something that you actually would want to set up. Okay, but you got to see this as a cost of doing business. This has to make sense to you. All right, now let's go down and look at some watchouts here. So, can you get the cost down? That's always a question we're going to ask, right? Can you make it cheaper? Yes, you can. You can get the cost down, but the costs lower with time and with strategy. So it takes some time to get this set up. Just because you set it up does not mean that everything's going to flow the way you want it to the very first time. It takes some iterations to get this thing tweaked and appropriately optimized. You got to build in some time for that. You also got to build in some strategy. There's some thoughtfulness that you're going to have to apply in order to make this make sense. So again, it won't just work out of the box immediately. We got to apply some pragmatism here. Okay. It's really important that the pages you set up, that registration page that you set up, the landing page or the thank you page after someone registers, these pages need to be simple. It's really easy to overcomplicate the page, overcomplicate the messaging, overcomplicate the design, and we forget how confusing all those details become to the person who's just trying to understand the opportunity and speak to somebody. So keep the pages and their outline as simple as you possibly can. So the prospect is going to set time on your calendar. This person who wants to talk to you, they're going to set time on your calendar. So now you can manage your calendar effectively, right? You can set some boundaries on when someone can book time or not book time, and so you're always available when someone books time because you set those boundaries. So there's some tools you can use, some scheduling software that you can use to manage your calendar. Great. So on this call, you do the selling. You're the expert, right? So you're going to do the selling here. You're going to talk on the phone. But the process needs the insight. So it's not just talking on the phone. Did they buy? Yes. Did they buy? No. But there's a way you got to think about what conversation you just had so you can continue to improve this entire process. So then looking at that cost per closed client, do you have the patience to get here? Because if you're advertising on LinkedIn for the very first time, if you've done advertising some other place, there's always going to be a learning curve when you begin to execute on the platform. Do you have the patience to get to this closed sale number, whatever it costs you to close a sale? Because if you don't have the patience, then don't start. Don't bother. Save your money. Use it for something else. An important comparison point here is this more or less expensive than hiring a salesperson? So the person I was talking to at the moment didn't have a sales team. So he was going to have to find people, hire them, train them, salary them, offer bonuses, and commission. And so if you think about all the costs associated with doing that, and you compare it to the cost of doing this, what makes sense? That choice is yours, clearly, right? But these are the comparison points that I think are appropriate when you think about running a system like this one. Now, a quick sanity check here, because if you've been doing your research about online advertising, you've seen advertisers boast at getting cost per click numbers much cheaper than $10 per click. And so you may have gotten mentally stuck right here thinking, come on, Alzay, can't you get it cheaper than that? Like, that sounds outrageous. So let's use some empirical data, shall we? Research has already been done on this. So, on LinkedIn, the average cost per click is $5.26, right? So this is the average, meaning some folks pay a whole lot more, some folks pay a whole lot less. And if you're new to this, you're probably not going to start at the whole lot less, right? You're going to have to get better as you go. Furthermore, here is some of my own data. So you can see my own cost per click here. Yes, sometimes I pay $2.82. Sometimes I pay $17.04 or somewhere in the middle. So again, the reality here is that you're going to pay a premium, but if your strategy is sound, then you can work those costs down. So back to the outline. You've seen the process. You have a general idea of what the cost of execution look like. But now let me share with you 4 specific things that are mandatory but rarely talked about in order to keep this process profitable for you. Here's the first thing, is that you need to target one person at a time. Now, you may know this as a client avatar or a buyer persona or a target client, and everybody says they have one of these things, but they don't use it. You say, where is it? No one ever knows where it is. You need this client avatar to be focused and to be sharp, and you need one of them at a time. One of the classic things that agencies do, one of the classic mistakes we make when we begin to execute digital advertising is we make 15 different targets at once. And we're thinking that we're going to figure out which one sticks or which one works. That approach splits your momentum 15 different ways. It splits your budget 15 different ways. A more appropriate, straightforward approach, efficient approach, is to focus on one particular person. And so what you're trying to do is get this bullseye effect happening, right? So you realize who belongs right here in the center. And if you create different iterations of that person, then that makes sense. But what you're after is one target profile. Get good at resonating with that profile. Prove to yourself that you can get that person on the phone. Prove that the system works, and then you can begin to expand out into other iterations, other types of decision makers, other types of companies. Keep focus on one person at a time. The second thing that's rarely talked about is how important it is to create a feedback loop on this process. So as you work through this process, you get data. That data must be used to refine the avatar. Are we getting the person that we thought we were going to get? And then if we are, great, double down on what we're doing. If we're not, then we have to make incremental changes with this process. Maybe the ad copy needs to change from what we've learned in this process. Maybe what we put on the registration page needs to change, or this video content needs to change, or what we say to prepare someone for the conversation needs to change, or how we're dialoguing on the phone needs to change. Any of these changes can make incremental movement in these numbers down here, which again can multiply the positive effect that you have. It can multiply your ROI by making these ads fundamentally cheaper. But you have to value this feedback loop. Oftentimes, the mistake we make is we make these micro changes. We look into the dashboard itself and we try to use those numbers to tweak what to say in the ads, or tweak the move the headline 3 inches to the left or to the right, or change this image or picture. And where, yes, those things have some value, but there's nothing more powerful. The number one thing you can do to maintain the integrity of this feedback loop is to look at what people are saying when you talk to them on the phone. What happens in this conversation is the most valuable feedback you need to maintain this integrity. You can't do it with just data from the tool alone. It's got to be married with, in fact, led by the information you're getting from live human being conversations. Number 3, optimize this process for the sale. The reason that you built this process is to make more sales. So that, therefore, optimize this process to communicate to the kinds of people who buy what you sell. The mistake that we make is we'll optimize this for things that are comfortable to us. We'll optimize this for clicks. We'll optimize this for leads. We'll optimize this for booked calls. And where each of those data points do have some value, absolutely. But at the end of the day, what you're after is for someone to make a purchase over here on this side of the equation. So as you think about designing this, each of these things should be inviting people who buy this kind of thing and repelling people who don't buy this kind of thing. And you got to be courageous enough to build the kind of system that will push people away if they're not the right fit for what you offer. The fourth point here is you have to have the courage to scrap this avatar if it's not working. So you make your hypothesis, you build an avatar, you run the campaign, you get some feedback loop, and you may find that the person that you thought you were targeting is very much somebody else. And so if it is someone else, then you've got to change not only this avatar, but change the entire funnel as a result. You need this avatar to lead this entire funnel, but that also requires some courage, because you may have to admit that you were wrong. You may have to admit that what you set up here is just flat out the wrong thing, and you've got to have the humility and the courage to scrap it if necessary and redesign appropriately. If you sell really big consulting projects, 6- and 7-figure deals that are complex sales with multiple stakeholders, the typical thing to do is to hire a sales team and to put that team in the field and let them deal with that complexity. But if you've been looking at or considering a more modern approach, a more advertising-based approach, a more content-based approach, it's going to end up looking something like this. But it's important to remember that the machines can't do all the work for you. There is some leverage you can get from having the machines, from having the internet, leverage or give you leverage in this process. But there is some thoughtfulness required on your end to make this system work on your behalf. Because at the end of the day, this is functioning as an automated salesperson. And so the same way you got to train a human salesperson, you got to train a digital salesperson. If you want the sale, if you want the scale, you still have to put in the work.